They stood there in the church and says, "Be quiet, this is not how Francis would preach." And then they would stand and say, "Everything is about love and forgiveness. You must love and forgive and be humble. Remember, you're the last." And everybody rejoiced. So Saint Francis was born Giovanni de Pietre Bernardoni. When his father heard his name is Giovanni after John the Baptist, he was like, "No way, my son is not going to be John. He's going to be a prince. He's going to be a rich man like me." He was trading with France, and he says, "We call him Francis. Forget what you said in the baptism." He was away on business. Call him Francis. Okay. And he grew up to be like his daddy, a little bit similar to the story of Buddha. Yeah, when Buddha was born, the same thing happened. And he was a rich man and loved by all, and had a lot of parties and did a lot of mischief, and then became a soldier and was taken captive. It's a very long story, very short. For 1 year he was in a dungeon. They kept him alive because his father was rich. They had a fight, Assisi and Perugia beat the life out of them. Eventually, after negotiation, Pietre Bernardoni, his father, paid off, and Francis was released, but he was broken. He was 1 year in a dungeon. He wasn't as much fun. He started to party again, but it was not fun anymore to party. He says, "Okay, maybe I'll be a soldier again." His religion fervor starts to appear, but he's mostly confused by it. Yeah, this is the first night of Francis's soul. Yeah, the first dark night. He's confused. He loved to be a rich boy, but now it seems empty. He decides, okay, maybe I do now a holy war. No, I do crusade. His father gets him a horse and a very expensive armor, and he's off to fight the Muslims and liberate Jerusalem for Christ. He gets very sick, and he has a vision. And in the vision it is said, what is better, to serve the master or to serve the servants? He says, well, to serve the master. Well, then serve the master, not the servant. And then he says, yes, I want. And he realizes it's Christ. What shall I do, master? He says, enough, go back home. This war is not for you, and you will receive further instruction. Francis, like Francis, sells his horse, gives the armor to some poor person and returns. His father is furious. It's very shameful to do such a thing and spending so much money from the family heritage. And he sees his son broken. He doesn't know what to do. He's less and less involved in the business life, and he starts to go to caves and to broken churches to pray. And he's like, okay, you said further instructions will come. I stopped the crusade. Tell me what to do further. And the sky is very quiet, and Francis is very broken. And that's somehow what's supposed to happen. So he breaks and he cries, and he goes into a deeper and deeper combination of depression, spiritual longing, and a lot of repenting. He realizes his old life was bad, and he's praying for forgiveness. He cried so much in his life, he became almost blind by the end of his life. He's shivering there in pain, and he's not getting an answer. He's not getting an answer. He says, look, I want to do your will, God, but you don't tell me anything. What shall I do? And this tension, wanting it and not getting it, dissolve Francis's personality, Francis's egoism, Francis's self-importance. And gradually he becomes pure. And then in the church of Saint Damiano, it's a broken church, the broken crucifix tells him, Francis, fix my church. So that's his second vision. And he is so happy. I have a command from God. And he understood it first literally, fix this church. Later he understands it, fix the church. But he starts by fixing this church. So he goes, he knocks on the doors, Italy, we fix the church, donate some money for stones and this and that, and people just donates a little bit and that, and he starts carrying stones all the way there. And when people pass, he says, hey, we're fixing the church, you better come and help me, there's so much work to do. And he was very charming and very charismatic, and the people, they start helping him out, the very poor, the beggars, they help him to fix the church. And as he's fixing the church, the first followers start to come. The very first, or the second, is one of his party friends, a rich lawyer, Bernard. And he's like, Francis, did you lose your mind? What's going on with you? You used to have everything, now you freeze here. What are you doing? But I love you, I'm your friend, let's spend some time together. And okay, they spend some time together, and in the night they sleep in the same room. And Francis goes on the bed and pretends to be sleeping, he's snoring or something. And Bernard also pretends to sleep, he doesn't sleep. He sleeps, he puts himself on the bed and snores also. It was probably a very funny moment because they're both not sleeping and they're both pretending to sleep. And then when Francis is convinced Bernard is sleeping, he gets up and he prays. He kneels down and he prays, my Lord, my all. My Lord, my all, my Lord, my all. The whole night. And then before the sun rises, he gets a little bit of light. He returns to the bed, covers with the blankets and pretends to be sleeping. And when Bernard saw this, he said, no, I want to be like you. What do I need to do? Another friend comes, and they're like, we want to live like you, Francis. And he's like, I didn't plan to lead anyone. I just live like this according to the word of God. But they say, come on, give us some commands. Let's do something. And he says, okay, we open the Bible 3 times. What it says, that we will do. A very crucial moment in the history of Christianity. They open once when the rich man comes to Christ and says, what can I do to be better? He says, follow the laws of Moses. He says, but I've done that from my youth. I want to go deeper into God. Okay, sell everything you have and follow me. And the man says, no, I can't do that. But Francis didn't put his finger on, no, I can't do that, nor on follow the 10 commandments of Moses. He put his finger on, sell all you have. Give it to the poor and come follow me. So that became the first commandment. So Bernard, the rich lawyer, and his friends, Rafino and others, Giles, they sold everything they have. They gave it to the poor. What does that mean? They went in the town square with all their possessions and they say, take what you want. And then like bees, everything was gone and they stayed half naked and they went to follow Francis. And then the other place where he opened, when Christ gives his commands to the apostles, he says, take nothing on your journey, not even shoes. And the third was, carry your cross daily. So these became the commands of the order. I wonder what would have happened if he would have opened somewhere else. To a virgin came a child. I am, the light and the way, and so forth. Me and my Father are one. This was the wish of God. So these became the commands, and they lived there, and more people joined. In 10 years, 5,000 people take this lifestyle, and they beg. And it's the neighborhood, it's a small town. So it's just like, you come and beg, you're a lawyer. No, I'm no longer a lawyer, now I'm a beggar. Well, I don't want to give you. And they wouldn't receive money for free. You would give them some bread, they would clean your house. They wouldn't just take, they would work. And so they lived there. They had absolutely nothing. And they were happy to the bones. And they started to go around preaching the joy of God. The joy of being nothing and no one. Francis's father gets very upset that Francis gave his property to the poor. And he sues him in court and to disinherit him, so he doesn't get any of his money and to have his money back. And Francis goes there, he takes off his clothes and he says, nothing of my father is mine, He stands there naked in front of everyone. These clothes were given to me by my Father. I give it back to them, and now I only say my Father in heaven. I have no other Father than my Father in heaven. The bishop takes off his bishop robe and puts it around Francis. And it was like an embrace that indeed now he has a new Father. He lives and preaches. They go 2 by 2 and the message spreads like fire. Italy, and then France, and then Portugal, and then Germany. Thousands of people follow these crazy monks that live like the Gospels, that live like the Desert Fathers, that live like the early Christians, even if they have a choice. And he receives powers from God to preach and to make miracles. He goes in Alviano, in a village. And by then he's famous now. Everybody is Santo, the saint is coming. All the city comes to see him. He goes to the city square. They probably put a few boxes, so he stands up high. And everybody's making a lot of noise, and he says, quiet, now I speak. But all the birds come. Hundreds, possibly thousands of birds come. Everything is filled like that movie, the Hitchcock movie. Birds and birds and birds, and they don't stop chirping, and he can't speak. They loved him, animals throughout his life, and he's this saint, the patron saint of animals. They loved him, and they all come where he is. And he stands there, and he tries to speak, and he can't, because they are so loud. So he stands, and he says, my sister swallows, sister birds, he would always call his animals sisters and brothers. Now it is time for me also to speak. Since you have already said enough, hear the word of God and stay quiet, stai tranquillo, until the word of the Lord is completed. He finishes the sentence, and the multitude of birds, in an instant, everything is quiet. The entire village became Franciscan. And there he has to make a choice, because if they all sell their property and give it to the poor, that's the whole village. They have to give it to each other, and nobody will work the land. And they're like, look, we all want to become Franciscans. We have families, got to feed the kids. What to do? So he starts the third order of Franciscans. So they live a family life, but nevertheless they take many of the vows of Franciscan and they live this beautiful life. Now in Gobino there's a wolf. The wolf eats people. They want to kill the wolf. They can't find him. Francis arrives. They tell him, look, we have this problem with the wolf. Can you take care of it? And he says, yes. He goes to the wolf, brother wolf, and he starts to speak to him, and he embraces him, and he caresses him, and he says, look, let's do like this. You stop eating the people. I make sure they come and they give you food, okay? That's between you and me. And indeed, the people from the village would come and feed the wolf. The wolf was like a dog. He became very nice and kind. They could caress him and they would give him food. And also there in Gobino, Franciscus became very famous. Now they lived this life. They would sleep on hay, on the floor. They had no food. And then one day, just to give you a little bit of the feeling of the crazy life that they lived. So one day, one of the brothers was sick. And he was so weak, because they didn't eat much, now they were beggars. He was so weak and he says, I want to eat the leg of a pig. And then one of the brothers says, my brother is sick, I will find him a pig. So he goes and basically steals a pig from a farmer and cuts the leg and cooks it for his brother, and his brother gets better. He basically stole that. And the poor pig with one leg less now. And then the farmer comes and he's like, you did this. You said you are saints. You are thieves. All of you are thieves. You came, you didn't ask. And this, he wants to hit him. And then the brother said, no, let me explain to you. My brother was sick. And he asked for the leg of a pig. So I cut it and I brought it for him. It wasn't for me. He really needed it. He was sick, you understand? And the man was like, I don't care. I'll beat all of you up and you're all thieves. And he says, no, let me explain to you again. He was sick, you understand? And this is what he needed. And now he ate it and he's better. It was an act of love, not of stealing. And the farmer starts crying and he embraces him and he gives them the whole pig. And he keeps on supporting the monks. This was the crazy life that they lived. They had a certain graceful inner freedom. They would meditate how? They would pray lying on the ground in the form of a cross with the face down. Try it. It's really hard. I tried it. And sometimes they would go for hours of spiritual ecstasy, samadhi. And then they would just go to lunch as if nothing happened. Simple brothers. Because they gave everything, it was very easy for them, with one short prayer or with one intense prayer or a week of prayer, to enter these spiritual ecstasies. Francis himself would spend 9 months a year in isolation, where he would just immerse himself in prayers in a cave or in little huts. And then 3 months he would take care of the brothers. He went to the Pope. You know, if you preach like this and you don't get approval, eventually you will be killed. It's the Middle Ages. And he courageously went to the Pope. And the Pope says, "This crazy, dirty beggars, what do you want from me? Get out." But then the Pope had a vision. In the night, a dream or a vision, where he saw the church falling and St. Francis putting the church in. There's a famous painting where Francis, the Pope, is dreaming and Francis is putting the church back. And he says, "Bring him back." He says, "What do you want? To start a new order?" Start a new order. And they become friends. And the Pope approves the very rigid law of Francis, and he's integrated in the church. He goes on the crusades, but this time as a friar, and he meets Malik al-Kamil, the Sultan of Egypt, who is then holding Jerusalem. So there's a battle, the battle stops, thousands of people die, the Muslims, the Crusaders. And then he walks in the end of the battle, alone, I think with a few friends, a few of his followers, unarmed. It was just, he could have just died, somebody could have just shot an arrow, but he felt the call of God. I got to speak to the Sultan and explain to him that Christ is God. He will understand, yeah? He will understand, come on. So he passes the ranks. It's an actual historical event. And the soldiers catch him, and somehow he gets to speak to the Sultan. It's not clear. There are many versions of the story. What happened? The Sultan asked him to pass in fire. He agreed to pass in fire. Another version is that he convinces the Sultan in Christ. The Sultan sees him. This is a man of God. But he says, "Look, if I turn to Christ, you and me will both be assassinated." Cannot be. What is clear is that he went, he spoke to the Sultan, and the Sultan brought him back alive. Which is big enough as an achievement in the midst of such a war. Together with him was the famous Saint Clare. They were childhood friends, and she opens the poor sisters, her monastery there, and she longs to meet Francis. She wants very much to meet her Saint Francis, and he doesn't. He refuses. Eventually all the monks, or many of the senior monks, they come to him and he says, "Saint Clare, she's pure in heart, she loves you, she wants to see you. Go and see her." And he, in a very Italian fashion, he says, "If it's your wish, it's my wish. But then we make a big feast." So they make a very big feast in the monastery there of St. Clare, and he comes and they eat together, and they speak of God, and they pray together, and they love each other in a very elevated spirit. It's like the perfect Christian couple. Yeah, the only. I don't know of many others. I mean, if you look at John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila, also had a very big love between them. But Francis and St. Clare was this immense love. And as they pray together and sit at the table and speak of God and love each other, a huge blue light appears. The people from the village, they see the light from afar, and it looks like fire. So, it wasn't like today that you had a fire brigade with an engine. So the poor people from the village, they fill their buckets, and they are good Christians, good brothers. They go with buckets, the city, to turn off the fire in the monastery. And they arrive at the door and they see it's not a fire, but spiritual light coming from the love of Saint Francis. And Saint Clare, it's a historical event. It's not now some, I don't know what, invention. So great was their love. Towards the end of his life, the Franciscans say, Francis, we had enough of you. It's too hard, your rules. We want to have at least a little bit of property, a bit of food for tomorrow. You cannot keep 5,000 people begging. We're starving, we're cold. No, it's the law of God. We open the book, that's what came. No, they kick him out. So he resigns. So they become, when he's still alive, the whole organization is like 10 years old, and they already kick out the head. And he's not interested in all these things. So he lets them. And they change the rules. And unfortunately, very quick, the Franciscans, in many ways, if you look a few generations later, they degenerate. They were the pioneers. People were thirsty for spiritual examples. And here were thousands of spiritual examples. So they donated everything as they died to the Franciscans, because they were the real monks. And then the Franciscan organization became so rich. And then politicians and people with politician mind entered and infiltrated this huge organization. And a few generations later, you find the Franciscan monks are the most corrupt, the fattest, the worst of all of them. They don't do anything anymore. And it's true, there's a lot of great Franciscan monks that still survive and still today. But there was a big degeneration that appeared quite quickly after Francis died. Francis has another deep, dark night of the soul towards the end of his life. He only lived 40-something years. He's completely broken. He's so sorry that people don't get it, that they don't get the message. And something in his heart is burning. He's in so much pain, physically, his eyes, he's sick, he's cold, and inwardly so much pain. And in the midst of all that pain, it's like a second purging. Like he was purged from his personality before becoming Franciscan, or before starting his way of life. There was another little seed of impurity in his soul. And he goes through a very profound process, similar to St. John of the Cross's dark night of the soul. He goes through a very difficult night. And it is brother Leo, who is next to him, who tells the story. He would sit in a cave, and Leo would bring him food and just see him more and more broken by the day. And then in the midst of that, he has a vision of Christ and the angels of God. And he sees one of the seraphim, the highest of angels, pierces his hands and his legs and his side. He receives the stigmata, which will escort him then throughout his life, through the rest of his life. He only lives a little bit after that, but he's basically constantly bleeding, and he receives this kind of miraculous body, as later Padre Pio and Saint Gemma and Teresa of Neumann also had this stigmata. It's a very mysterious thing, because people were crucified with the nail here. If you put the nail there, the body falls. It's not possible physiologically. The nail was never in Christ's hand. It was here. And nevertheless, because the image is as such, the people that had stigmata, they had it here in the palm of the hand, as it is traditionally described. And he somehow has his final enlightenment with that process, and it is said that when he left the world, he took the throne of Lucifer. Lucifer was the closest angel to God, and then he fell, and the chair of the closest to God was left empty until Francis. And when Francis died, he sat there. His legacy continues very much with Anthony of Padua, who was his, let's say, foremost disciple, who was a great miracle worker, and he gave an explanation. Francis was simple. Francis knew nothing. Francis read little, and it was not for him to explain anything. He was just sainthood. He was just love. But Anthony, He understood Francis, and he was a great scholar and a great miracle worker. And he gave the volume, the understanding of the message of Saint Francis. He remains, and his poetry, his understanding, his simple insights, they remain until today. You know, after he died, some great scholars came from England to preach in the church, and they would come and quote the scriptures and quote the saints and quote the scholars. And then the old disciples of Francis, Saint Leo and Saint Bernard, who were simple people and knew nothing, they stood there in the church and says, "Be quiet, this is not how Francis would preach." And then they would stand and say, "Everything is about love and forgiveness. You must love and forgive and be humble. Remember, you're the last." And everybody rejoiced. It somehow remained. The beauty of his message remained in that simplicity, in that utter humility. As a last story, the brothers, they would take care of the lepers. Yeah, that was one of the things that Francis did, and also the others. And somehow, why? What's the thing with Christians and lepers? Yeah, they don't take care of people with epilepsy. It's always with the lepers. Why not people with constipation? Yeah, no, it's not. No. Okay, if you're a Christian monk, you go and you take care of people with constipation or diarrhea. No, you go for the lepers. Why? You see, when Francis, somehow when his personality dissolved and his will dissolved in the will of God, after he passed his first test and his first crisis, then he was no longer a cell in the body. He was the body. Now, when the body is sick, it goes and takes care of the part that is sick. So Francis became the body and the will of God. And what would God do? He would first take care of these poor lepers that nobody wants to see, that are starving, that are in pain. And they would clean the lepers. It was already when Francis was old, this particular scenes. And there was one leper who was so grumpy. He was such a pain in the neck. The brothers would come, you know, they don't ask for anything. They bring you food, they clean you. And this guy was, ouch, 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 ouch. No, stop doing it. And he was complaining and shouting at everyone. And then Francis passed and says, what happened? He says, you, Franciscus, your brothers, they are clumsy. They keep on hitting me. It hurts how they clean me. They don't understand what they're doing. And he says, it's okay, my friend. I will take care of you. What would you like me to do for you? Well, here and here and here. And Francis takes and starts cleaning his wounds and kissing his wounds. And the man complains, and no, it's too much. And Francis, with all humility, slowly, okay, then I do it softer. How is this and how is that? And as he finishes cleaning him, the man is healed. Just like Francis didn't say, I heal you in the name of Christ. It was just Francis, being the humble Francis that he was. It was enough for the healing of the most grumpy of lepers, the most grumpy. The other ones, they didn't complain, they stayed lepers. This one, he had a good intuition. A good intuition. Start complaining and see how you heal. So this is in short. There's many, many stories. There's quite a few biographies. I strongly suggest quite a few on YouTube. Really, you can read or you can listen to the audiobooks. Really, one of the best 8 hours of my life was listening to the audiobook with his biography. Yeah, there's nobody like Francis. He really got it, you know. And he said very clearly, what you are looking for is what is looking. He understood that God is consciousness. He said it in an elusive way, not to go too far from the Christian dogma, but he understood. And that understanding of God as consciousness, as love, as humility, it made him what he was. How is the Franciscan order today? Well, I mean, Padre Pio came from there. So the greatest saint of the 20th century is still there. So they're still alive, you know. They get they get like a crust in time, all these orders, and then comes a reformer and brings life again. A great spirit appears again, you know. Basically, the Franciscans and the Carmelites, they are the most mystical, the most alive when it comes to the inner world and the inner realization. Yeah. The Carmelites is Teresa of Avila, Saint John of the Cross, Teresa of Lisieux. They are Carmelites. If you like this video and want to learn more about Tantra, about yoga, about psychology, emotional healing, lives of saints and the scriptures,
then hit the bell, like, subscribe, and you'll never miss an upload. Thank you so much.